This week in the business of tech, the seasonality of IT services, how many more subscriptions can customers take, CISA's leader talks about storytelling, Europol celebrates 6 years of No More Ransom and reveals successes, Service Leadership's 2022 Profitability Report, employers are failing to force people back to the office, and Microsoft's earnings call reveals possible SMB weakness. All these stories and more. Hit those like, subscribe, and the notification button, and help us pay the bills. And here are this week's stories. Amazon is buying healthcare provider One Medical for $3.9 billion. Not heard of One Medical? It's a membership-based service including an app, 24/7 access to on-demand telehealth services over video, and guaranteed same or next day appointments available through more than 125 offices. Why do we care? Amazon is moving further into healthcare. This certainly isn't their first. They bought PillPack in 2018 and Health Navigator to make Amazon Care, which is a primary care service. Why? They need markets that can feed their growth requirements, and there aren't many left. This isn't expected to get blocked by regulators, so expect this to happen. I'm all for disruption in healthcare. It's a bloated, wasteful industry ready for a change. But the downside here will be those providers serving the space. It won't happen instantly, but consider the future scenario where a doctor is offered a complete package of services from Amazon to deliver their services, be paid, and cut out the hassles of both insurance and technology. There will be many healthcare providers who consider that. If you're in tech in healthcare, you should care an awful lot. In Water is Wet news, web hosting provider Bluehost just released their third study on small and medium-sized businesses, which focuses on digital adoption for business growth. They concluded from their findings 4 key points. Sentiment is starkly different across regions and favorable in growth economies. SMBs know going digital is key to survival, the need to harness digital tools, and the importance of managing transactions from a distance. Only 15% of respondents in the US showed a positive outlook about the country's economy. Of course, that doesn't mean they aren't planning. 7 in 10 C-suite executives already have a cost transformation initiative or plan to implement one within the next 6 months, according to an Accenture report which surveyed 2,000 C-suite executives. And to pair with water, the sky is blue news. QuoteWorks released its 2022 Trends in IT Procurement report, highlighting the problems in product sourcing. Almost half of the respondents to the survey listed supply chain or sourcing delays as their biggest hurdle in the quote and proposal creation process. Other big pain points were product availability, 19%, obtaining prices from vendors and distributors, 9%, and creating configurations or determining what to quote, 10%. Why do we care? I snark because I love, I promise. Story version. Conditions look rough out there. Small business owners know they need technology, many business owners are investing in it, and getting technology products remains hard. This is more validating feelings than insights, although that's not to say there isn't utility in that. And in 2 stories I don't usually do, Verizon's earnings were off in consumer, but of note to listeners here, were strong in SMB and fixed wireless broadband. Small and medium-sized businesses proved a bright spot for Verizon. The carrier's operating revenues in the segment increased almost 7% to $3.1 billion. Global enterprise, public sector, and wholesale all saw operating revenues decrease. Second, cyber insurance and MDR provider Arcasure acquired 2 MSPs and added them to their cyber services division. One is focused on IT support to small and medium-sized businesses, and the other is an IBM-focused partner. Why do we care? For all the sentiment, worry, and clutching of pearls, myself included, there's some performance data that, so far, the SMB market is solid. That's why I highlighted the Verizon data. As for the second, it's the pairing of technology and insurance, and in this case, services too, that I wanted to note. I was anticipating and predicted the tech plus insurance angle, but didn't expect it to be with services too. Contrast that combination with a product without an insurance guarantee, which looks a whole lot less attractive. That's the competition of the future. Microsoft, with their Landscape and Attitude study, is a look at 3,000 small and mid-sized businesses in 10 countries around the world. Microsoft defines SMBs as organizations with 1 to 300 employees, which covers about 149 million customers. The sector has been growing 20% year over year, and 80% of that SMB business is transacted through partners. Microsoft estimates that in 2023, IT spending will grow to about $1.2 trillion for organizations between 1 and 300 employees. Much of that will still be for on-premises solutions, but over $500 billion will be cloud-related spending. Highlights from the report. Half of the tech decision makers are senior and mainly Gen X. A significant number, 41% of millennials, are moving into decision-making roles. 80% of men are tech decision makers compared to 20% of women. Millennials are much more optimistic about the future and more confident, 40% more, that their company will achieve business objectives. The smaller the organization, the more likely it is to be focused on survival. It is also less likely to have a business plan and be less optimistic about the future. However, most SMBs at 69% prioritize growth regardless of size, and second place is profit at 67%. I also want to note an analysis by Tortoise & Hare Software of Google Trends data related to IT services, quoting the blog. There's been much panic recently about an upcoming recession, and current trend data points to a drop in demand for IT services. As of July 2022, if we look at the historical data for the select queries above and aggregate them, we can see that a drop in IT services demand during the summer is nothing unusual. In fact, if you analyze historical query data for IT services related volume, you see a pretty clear correlation between when the kids are out of school and when people are shopping for IT support services. There are seasonal slumps almost every year between late May and late August, when summer vacation is in session and families are more likely to be out vacationing. There are also seasonal slumps over the holidays when people are traveling and kids are out of school for Christmas break. Why do we care? Don't let it be said I'm not about contrasting opinions. I've mentioned that economic conditions are weird, but also have patterns. The seasonality of services is real, and we have every reason to believe it will continue. You might be a bit slower simply due to it being summer. Now, the other data point I noted and wanted to highlight was the rise of Gen X. I'm biased, I am Gen X, but it's a generation rarely mentioned in all of these discussions. We're used to it. It seems to be a theme for the generation itself. What this does mean is that the power is fading for the boomers. Next time you look around and see a room full of white-haired boomers, you should consider, are you in the right room for where the decision makers are? You may not remember, but I covered the directive to remove Chinese telecom equipment from carriers during the Trump administration. And it's not going smoothly. As reported in Politico, small communications networks, mainly in rural areas, are saddled with old Chinese equipment that they can't afford to remove and which they can't repair if it breaks. The companies say they want to ditch the Chinese tech, but promised funds from Congress aren't coming quickly enough and aren't sufficient to cover the cost. This represents nearly 200 U.S. carriers, including rural wireless networks and broadband internet and TV providers, a handful of universities, school districts, and even city governments. The Federal Communications Commission revealed last week that it had cost $3.08 billion more dollars than the $1.9 billion allocated initially to pay U.S. companies to ditch Huawei and ZTE. Congress is now on the hook to come up with the additional funds to extract and replace those parts, which comprise the guts and sometimes the brains of these networks. Why do we care? There's a desire to believe that all the internet infrastructure is entirely comprised of big companies. It's not true. Smaller providers are a critical piece of this, and we should consider these like roads and bridges and ensure they're all invested in. Didn't want to miss this review from Protocol. Focusing on micro subscriptions, the piece highlights the growing trend of small payments, pulling from the article. Monthly payment for the latest SaaS offering too expensive? Switch to consumption-based pricing and just pay for what you use. Bored of the existing features on Snap? Sign up for the $3.99 per month premium offering. Don't want to buy a $70 video game? Download one for free and pay for expanded features as you go. There are indicators of increasing consumer animosity and evidence that companies may be testing the boundaries of the subscription business model. Software as a service has become the primary method of delivery, creating headaches for some IT leaders who now find themselves with bloated application suites. In an instantly classic case of jumping the shark, BMW decided to start charging $18 monthly for a subscription to seat heaters. Rightly so, the move was ridiculed. Many businesses are used to offering a set of products or services as a bundle, which makes it easier to unbundle and sell as separate subscriptions. Couple that with concerns about an economic slowdown ahead, and it's a low-hanging strategy for businesses to try to both grow and diversify their sales. If done right, subscriptions can provide a more stable revenue stream, one that also gives companies the option to hike prices on consumers as a way to bolster revenues. Slack, for example, just raised the cost on its premium tier. And software vendors, eager to avoid the central IT office, are going directly to users with low introductory pricing options to get them hooked on the product. Why do we care? That last line is what perked my attention. Many service providers have been focused on everything as a service for a while, and in particular, bundling. How much a customer can absorb will be a question to face as subscriptions become more and more prevalent. I'm not advocating blowing up your bundles right away, but I am considering the upper limit and where there will be value in more line item subscriptions versus the whole bundle. Pricing will matter. Getting your bundling right will differentiate and accelerate your adoption. The Washington Post reviews Jen Easterly's first year as head of the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and one of her main focuses is, quote, cutting out the nerd speak. Quoting the article, every engagement that I have, I am incredibly deliberate about the messaging and the communications behind that, she told in a Monday interview. People who are technical and in cyber, I think, are not as deliberate as they should be about being good storytellers. Maybe that means using a song by 70s rock band Boston to sell consumers on a key security technology, like with CISA's More Than a Password campaign to convince people to adopt multi-factor authentication. But the phrase multi-factor authentication makes eyes glaze over, Easterly said. Or maybe, even though the word is in the name of her agency, it means reevaluating whether to call cybersecurity something else altogether. She cites the push from tech investors Ron and Cindy Gula, who have advocated instead for calling it data care in their job postings to evoke the concept of healthcare, and thereby make it more relatable to women in communities of color who might be turned off by the term cybersecurity, its evocation of war and law enforcement. Why do we care? As someone who thinks a lot about language, Easterly's message resonated. My IT Security is a Tax editorial from the weekend is precisely this, a different positioning. I've repeated numerous different ones over the course of this podcast. This is rampant in our industry. Overly complicated phrases and abstraction away from simple ideas. And more importantly, I want to highlight the value of storytelling. Are you communicating a compelling story to your customers here? As an industry as a whole, it's not. And frankly, most of the language from industry is hot garbage. There's space to be a whole lot better, and the bar isn't that high. If you're an MSP looking to grow your business by scaling your cyber practice, it's critical to offer a white label, multi-tenant SOC as a service. AgileBlue is that SOC XDR, detecting cyber attacks on the cloud, network, applications, and endpoints before a breach occurs. trusting nothing while detecting everything, and staffed with a 24/7 expert set of threat hunters and cyber analysts who obsess over you and your client's cybersecurity, AgileBlue works side by side with your team. Join today and get 3 months of EDR free by visiting agileblue.com/pod to start. Europol marked the 6th anniversary of No More Ransom, the European Union law enforcement agency's anti-ransomware initiative, by releasing their figures on how many organizations they have helped stop ransomware. That figure, over 1.5 million victims successfully decrypted their machines without giving in to ransom demands, preventing an estimated $1.5 billion from ending up in the hands of cybercriminals. In another flip-the-script story, researchers from CISA, a firm that indexes devices connected to the internet, said last week they found what appears to be a ransomware command and control network capable of launching attacks, including one host located in the US. Further analysis that included historical data tied to those hosts led the researchers to additional hosts and connections to the Medusa Locker ransomware variant, which was the subject of a July 1st alert from the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. That doesn't mean they aren't still trying new tactics. Cozy Bear, the Russian state-sponsored hacking group, shared malware-infected files with foreign embassies in Brazil and Portugal in May using Dropbox or Google Drive storage, researchers at Palo Alto Networks said. Why do we care? While tactics matter, it's the data from Europol that I wanted to focus on. That's a pretty sizable number, and somehow just a dent in the entire market. More importantly, it proves that there is a methodology for not paying. It's intentional, however, and often left out of the anti-ransomware discussion. Sure, you talk all the time about preventing the occurrence, but how often do you speak with customers about preventing the payment and do the legwork of the disaster replanning? I suspect not often enough. Service Leadership has released its 2022 annual IT Solution Provider Industry Profitability Report. Here are some highlights. For all business models, 2021 was a year of profitability growth, even exceeding strong revenue growth. Revenue grew 8.8% from 2020, while adjusted EBITDA increased 13.5%. Not surprisingly, best-in-class firms grew the fastest. For MSPs specifically, overall revenue growth was a remarkable 16%, with a 15.5% growth in EBITDA. After budgeting 12% revenue growth and achieving it with 12.4% revenue growth in 2021, MSPs are budgeting 19% revenue growth in 2022, a 64% increase over 2021. Additionally, they are budgeting around a 40% growth in their overall net operating income. This optimism should be tempered because, in 2021, they had budgeted 27.7% net operating income, while achieving only 12.6%. As of 2021, 31% of technology solution providers were founded 30 or more years ago, while about 50% were founded 25 years ago or more. Thus, many first-generation IT company owners are in their late 50s to 70s and are actively planning the succession of leadership and ownership needed to extract the required value for the next phase of their lives. While the average MSP has increased in size, smaller companies still dominate the industry. 82% of technology solution providers are under $10 million in revenue, and about 69% are under $5 million. When looking across the last 14 years of results across all business models, the best-in-class consistently achieved anywhere on average between 17 to 22% EBITDA compared to the median of 4 to 10%. The bottom quartile always lost money, which continued in 2021, negative 10% to negative 1%. The bottom quartile does not have a sustainable business model. This group is the most transitory, with members either improving median performance, being acquired at a discount, or ceasing operations. Why do we care? I have to start with a headline that remains true. 1 in 4 providers are unsustainable businesses. Remember that for every commentator and poster on IT services. Also remember that this market is generally sub $10 million in revenue, and mostly sub $5 million. I have to note how old these companies are. There's some real opportunity here for disruption, even if that means disruptive leadership. Plus, there are many possibilities for younger employees or entrepreneurs to pick up those assets. Of course, there's also the angle for new thinking to disrupt those organizations. Revenue growth of 16% is excellent for services. Put that in context. Services. If you're a product business, not so much. Not good or bad, just comparatively different. I say this as a fan of services businesses, just recognizing their growth looks different from product ones. Know this detail when you're comparing, particularly if you're considering the valuation of your organization. As we all try and figure out the weird state of play, here's a smattering of data points that I'm reviewing. New Census Bureau and Harvard University research says that by age 26, 80% of young adults live fewer than 100 miles from where they grew up. 90% live fewer than 500 miles away. Black and Hispanic people live closer to their hometowns than other groups, per the study. And distances traveled rise rapidly at the top of the income distribution, increasing to an average of 325 miles for those born to families in the top 1%. Between June 29th and July 11th, nearly 3.9 million people said they did not work because they were either sick with coronavirus symptoms or were caring for a sick loved one, according to recent Census Bureau data. In comparison, almost 1.8 million people around the same time last year said they missed work for those reasons. Oh, and it's vacation too. Nearly 4.8 million people took time off during the week that the Census Bureau did its June household survey. During the same period in 2021, around 3.7 million were taking time off. A survey of 1,000 UK workers by Slack found that almost 9 in 10, at 86%, would prefer to work longer hours over fewer days by shortening the typical work week from 5 days to 4. Slack found that 66% of respondents say they would look for a job immediately or within 3 months if their company did not offer hybrid or remote working. Boston University surveyed another 1,000 people. More than half of the respondents experienced recurring loneliness, and 15% of the sample population fell into the at-risk category. More lonely employees think about quitting more than the least lonely ones, and co-working and third spaces were found to address this. And the cherry on this series, Insider looks at employees refusing to come back into the office. At companies requiring employees to come in 5 days a week, fewer than 49% of employees are actually doing so, meaning that more than half of their workforces are flat out refusing to comply. And even at companies that require attendance for only part of the week, there's still a sizable share of employees, as high as 19%, who aren't coming in as much as they're supposed to. The most common repercussions employees reported in the work from home survey? Nothing at all. And only 12% of respondents say their employer has fired someone for refusing to come in. Why do we care? Surveys are undoubtedly backward indicators. How much will economic uncertainty matter? Time will tell. But for IT services companies, I suspect the answer is not much. While I'm a bit nervous, most of the analysts I'm tracking are less so. And as we know from yesterday, there's a lot of optimism. So if that's the case, keeping and retaining people isn't going to get any easier. I'm trying to take a broad, inclusive view of people as humans rather than cogs in the machine of work. Savvy employers will consider their entire life, not just their life at work, when considering how to manage them. Oh, and my I told you so? I predicted that companies couldn't force people back in, and it's playing out exactly that way. I don't expect that to change much. What are they going to do, really? So Jeremy on Twitter asked me about Microsoft partner designations that are replacing the existing programs. He noted that the new program is, quote, significantly more difficult to attain and, quote, it isn't exactly easy to navigate the partner site or get help. It seems Microsoft's changes are impacting their bottom line too. On the earnings call on Tuesday, Chief Financial Officer Amy Hood said, quote, partner transition work hurt growth with small and mid-sized business customers and added that moderation in small and mid-sized business deals had a negative effect on paid Office 365 commercial seats, the enterprise mobility and security business, and Windows commercial products and cloud services revenue, further quoting CRN. Licenses aimed at SMB customers are, quote, primarily sold through a partner, and so we need to make sure we've got the best value props, but got to make sure the price is right, offers right, and make sure that we are tuning that value prop to what small business customers need today, which is great value, Hood said on Tuesday's call. We'll keep executing through a partner. We're in the middle of that transition we talked about last quarter, and we're still working on it, she added. She continued, that is a spot where you tend to see macro weakness show itself. While I can't tell you in particular which part of that was some of the partner transition work we're doing versus macro, it certainly feels like both. And so that's certainly a spot that we're watching. Of course, their shares rose 5% on Tuesday, too, after they included positive income forecasts for the year, and the main driver of growth is the cloud products, specifically Microsoft's Intelligent Cloud segment, which consists of the Azure Public Cloud for application hosting, SQL Server, Windows Server, and enterprise services. So I noted Google's cloud revenue was up too, a 35.61% increase from the same quarter of 2021. While their ads business missed revenue expectations, their cloud business is looking strong. Why do we care? My take. Microsoft is convinced their new partner program will get them to more significant growth and more sales. That's the goal. They're in the midst of the transition, and so they're prepared for choppy waters, and more importantly, not being punished yet by shareholders. Each quarter, we should be watching that and see how it improves. If it improves, you shouldn't expect more changes soon. If it doesn't, expect them to course correct. Now is absolutely the time to be trying to address the program changes. And Microsoft, if you're listening, you have at least one partner confused, and you can find him on the @MSP Radio News Twitter feed. If there's one speaking up, there's probably more. Thanks for your time and attention. Time is a finite resource, and I really value you giving me some of yours. If you like this video, you can let me know with a like of the video, and even more valuable, hitting the subscription button. My content is all free, and I use metrics like subscriptions to pay the bills, so it has real value. The content here is produced under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you're interested in more content like this, you can get access to content early via our Patreon at patreon.com/MSPradio. It's our give what you want model where you set the value of what you think the content is worth. If you like this podcast, you can catch it daily as the 5-minute news and commentary show, The Business of Tech, available on all your favorite podcatchers with links at businessof.tech. Just hit that big blue button to subscribe. Again, thank you for taking time out of your day to listen, and I really value the interaction. If you want to say something in the comments, I do respond and watch all that, and I look forward to talking to you next time.